for YouTube, so just keep that in mind if you have any comments that, you're being well, George is being recorded, but.
We can hear you in the background, so if there's any snide remarks, I'll weed them out, and I'll find out where you live and everything else. Okay. Are we ready?
If you're ready, yep, I'm ready. You just let me know when you want me to switch.
Okay. It says, hello, my name is George Metzer, and I was born in Somerset a very long time ago. You thought I was going to do that, didn't you? My mother was Helen Beale, and I graduated from Marisdale Joint High School, also a very long time ago, and I worked on a farm and joined the U.S. Air Force. I maintained airplanes and eventually cross-trained into the dental service, and I retired as a master sergeant. I've been drawing all my life, at least I can remember, since I was at least 5 years old. And I began cartooning in 1972, and I think that's a lot before most of you guys were born. When I was asked by my field maintenance squadron commander's maintenance officer, Captain John L. Berkey, to create a series of safety cartoons to be distributed throughout our military airlift command training wing at Aldous Air Force Base in Oklahoma. Those few cartoons evolved into a weekly panel printed in the base newspaper. I entitled the strip Mentzer's Way. There are 4 ways of doing things: the right way, the wrong way, the Air Force way, and Mentzer's way. So in my own weird way, I imposed my thoughts on the Air Force for the next 8 years. The scary thing was, for the most part, I got away with it. Huh? And they were never censored. As long as I didn't directly insult anyone, I was okay. While in Arizona, Ed Jewett, the printer of the base newspaper I was cartooning for, called me and took me to dinner and asked if I could do editorial cartoons, and he would pay me for the effort, which I'd never been paid before by the Air Force. He also would feed me the ideas, and believe me, that helped a lot. So for the next 2.5 years, I turned out up to 4 cartoons a week, both for the Arizona Territorial, Mr. Jewett's paper, and for the Desert Airman, the Air Force base newspaper. When I got to Alaska, I found a similar weekly newspaper for the next 3 years, had a weekly panel in both the All Alaska Weekly in downtown Fairbanks and the base newspaper, the Gold Banner. Side note, I also worked with Bob Ross. He was the hospital squadron's first sergeant. And I also met Lieutenant Linda Garlitz from Salisbury. Her mother was Hazel Garlitz that had Garlitz Grocery Store in Salisbury. She was the public relations officer at Eielson Air Force Base. I received a couple of awards for the effort, and I was selected at one point for Safety Man of the Quarter for the Alaskan Air Command. Tom Snap, All Alaska Weekly owner and publisher, even submitted a couple of my cartoons to the Alaska Press Club annual editorial contest. He was so sure they would win, he paid to have us fly down to Anchorage and accept the award. My cartoon came in second, but unfortunately, there was no second place award for editorial cartooning. And Mr. Snap, though, did win a couple of awards for editorial content of the newspaper itself. Prior to my retirement, I was stationed at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio, and had a few cartoons published in the Wright Flyer, the base newspaper. While in school, to finish my education, I sold a few cartoons, and upon returning to Marisdale, submitted work to the Johnstown Tribune, the Somerset American, and the Cumberland Times News. They were never used, and they would have been paying. To help pay the bills, I took a year to cartoon full-time and submitted an average of over 10 a week to various magazines, and again on spec. I sold a few, but these magazines paid very little. My wife and I generally had up to 50 cartoons in the pipeline each week. During that time, I was hired by the Cumberland Times News and submitted cartoons for them for over 5 years. I normally created up to 5 or 6 cartoons a week, mostly on spec, and generally had 1 a week used, and I was paid for those. I was nominated for awards for the MDDC Press Club and won 2 awards for the newspaper for editorial cartooning, and traveled to Washington D.C. to accept him. MDDC stands for Maryland, Delaware, and the District of Columbia. Then I began to work for the Republican, but that owner did not want cartoons, even though he did use a couple. But when we bought the New Republic, I began to use them every week. Again, I usually did a couple a week and would use the best examples. I still was careful as to who I depicted. As the only salesman we had, I knew too many people personally, and it could have affected my sales. Some people did take offense, usually deserved, and only a few times did someone call me on it. But generally the carp was about a cartoon that I thought was insignificant. I tried to get people to think about the drawings and maybe create enough of a stir to write letters in opposition or in favor. But for the most part, that never happened. I just wanted to boost readership in the paper. Okay, we can go to PowerPoint. Okay. Most of my cartoons are in black and white. This isn't a cartoon, obviously. These two gentlemen in the front getting splattered with the pie are doctors. These were in the hospital squadron in Alaska. Every year we had an annual picnic, and it was everything goes. Nobody could be court-martialed for anything we did. The gentleman on the left is Bob Ross. He's the famous painter that was stationed with me. He was our squadron's first sergeant. Okay, we can go. We cropped off a lot of that one. But anyhow, cartoons have been used by almost all artists since probably about the 1400s, 1300s, 1400s. Even Da Vinci used cartoons. The drawings up on the left, that's a cartoon. And that was what I used as the basis for this painting right here. And that was only one of about 20 sheets of paper that I did on this thing. Anyway, basically this one was never used because there's no byline down at the bottom of it. But anyhow, it says obviously these guys have never met my Uncle Charlie after he's eaten chili, beans, and beer. And the newspaper that he's reading says environmental groups to probe methane production in cows. Results may result in higher beef prices. Well, believe it or not, the beef price is gonna, this cartoon was probably done about 20 years ago. Now, back in the day, whenever they installed Supreme Court, the Clarence Thomas supposedly had a reputation for women. The lady, I can't remember her name, the first woman on the Supreme Court.
Sandra Day O'Connor.
Huh?
Sandra Day O'Connor.
I knew somebody would know the answer to that. Anyhow, everybody's got their hand showing, except for Mr. Thomas. And of course, if you look at, can you see okay?
It's fine. You're good.
You really need to see.
It's okay.
It's okay. So anyhow, in 1991, that was kind of the big thing, was that everybody would wonder how they would accept, first off, a black person, and secondly, a lady. So anyhow, that was where that would evolve from, and this one was used. Okay. Now, it was Governor Donald Schaefer. Governor Schaefer had this nasty habit. If he didn't like a journalist, he would write a nasty letter to that journalist for something that the journalist had written about him. But anyhow, I thought that I would do enough cartoons on him that eventually I would get a letter from him, because that would have been a feather. I mean, it really would. And I did write one cartoon. I did draw one cartoon that I understand that he was not particularly appreciative of, but it had involved gas taxes that the Maryland had imposed on fuel. But anyway, his aide has obviously misunderstood what he was wanting. Okay. And then this is kind of an apology. Mayor Stern was a civilian. He was not a politician. And when he got in, he thought as a civilian, I can do things and I don't have to follow along with the politician's way of handling situations. So he just was willy-nilly and wouldn't listen to his the board members, the commissioners and things from Cumberland, Maryland. And he called my editor up at the Cumberland Times and complained about the cartoons. So Mr. Jan Alderton, who's the editor down there, he called me and said, George, he said, I have a problem with Mr. Stern. I said, fine. He says, you owe him an apology. And I said, okay. Well, if you read it, he says, I'm sorry for Mayor Stern's closed-door policies on official matters that are of no public concern. So if you read that one, it's kind of convoluted. It kind of flip-flops around an apology. And yeah, I didn't get called on this one, so I thought I made it. But anyway, and the little sign there says, tongue firmly planted in cheek. But anyway, that's where that one goes from. And recycling hurts. And if you remember the early days of recycling paper, paper was kind of on the rough side. And, but anyhow, this one was used. It says the only difference between cheap bathroom tissue and sandpaper is that the sandpaper comes in finer grits. So if you think about it, you can remember the early days of recycling whenever they mixed crap with other crap and it came out like as rough as a cob, then you'll understand. And if you're from around here, you know what rough as a cob means. Okay.
Whoops, I think I went one too far. There you go.
Okay. Can you back it up any? No, don't. I just wonder if you can. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Let's go forward.
yeah.
You missed it. You missed, how many did you miss? Okay,
That's one, yeah.
the next one is the correct
Yeah.
one, okay. And this one is picking on the school systems. Because it said, I understood it, there were some of the schools that really weren't teaching good practical math. And if you look at the boards, he said, I just said cut the board to exactly 2 feet, 8.5 inches. When will these kids learn math? Well, every one of them is standing there with a different length of a board. So it just, and believe me, I knew people that had no concept of how to measure out the length of something or the width. Okay. And this was another dig on Cumberland. Somehow, Mayor, I think we should find another name for that program, Shade Tree Commission. Well, around here, shade tree means not exactly up to standards. You have a shade tree mechanic that, you know, he'd do anything to make sure that the car runs till it gets out of the shop and then it quits, okay? So that's where Shade Tree came from, but they actually had the name of the program that they called Shade Tree Commission. And Marisdale had their Shade Tree Commission too for a while. Okay. This one was a dig on politicians in general, and I can't read his name, okay. Senator Fogbound, P-H-O-G, Bound, B-O-U-D-N-D, okay. And it says, I promise to do everything I can do to lower the deficit. And you can see he's got his fingers stuck in the top of the pay raise tank. Okay. Now, I got on Marisdale for a while because the borough council sometimes did things that, you know, weren't quite up to snuff. If you've ever been down around Dunkas's and they don't have arrows painted on the pavement, if they don't have arrows painted on there, people have no idea which way they're gonna go. And when you make a left-hand turn to go around the monument, you might have somebody sitting there, or the right-hand turn to come uptown, you might have somebody sitting on the side of you that was gonna go down around the monument. So that's where this one came from. And it says, you don't suppose a bucket of paint and some lines and arrows would solve the problem. And of course I have our doughboy down there with a bucket of yellow paint. And within a week or two after we published this, Somebody went down there and painted the arrows on the street to indicate where you should be making your turns to. Now, every year I did a cartoon on a calendar that we generated that I gave to customers. I only printed 250 of them. So if you ever find one, buy it for whatever they're selling it for, because eventually it'll be worth $1 million. But anyhow, this is where I had the freedom to do pretty much anything I wanted to do. So if you look at this drawing enough, you'll understand of course, it was primarily to advertise the New Republic. And we had coal miners. And if you look there, the bucket down there says Shaw, which is Shaw Mines. The two kids are reading the New Republic, and the boy has a World War II Flyers helmet and a set of goggles. And if you look down there above my name, you'll see a mouse reading the newspaper in a hole. Of course, you see the sign. It says, "Put in, pull," which means you put a quarter or 50 cents or $1 into it, and you pull the thing and open it up. And of course, everything is geared towards reading. It says that read the New Republic from 1901. There's a squirrel on top of the coin slot that's reading the Marisdale, the New Republic. The lady is obviously well endowed, which I couldn't put that in the paper, but if it's hanging on your wall at the house, different story. But anyway, she's reading the newspaper. And if you look in the window, there's somebody sitting in there with their feet propped up, which we generally never did. And of course, he's got a hole in his shoe, which is one of my little things that I always stick in most cartoons, if you see the bottoms of their feet. But anyway, that's what we did. We turned out once a year. I think I turned out about 15 of them. Unfortunately, I haven't kept the original. I've got the originals buried someplace, but who knows? We can do that now. And in my kind of a gruesome sense of humor, the turkey says, "And what guarantees do I have that I'll have a chance to become the national bird if you have me over for dinner?" Well, if you look closely, you'll see the Indian's got a tomahawk, and I highlighted that by putting a little sparkle on it, and he's drooling a little bit. Well, guess what? Guess what he's going to have for dinner? The turkey don't know this yet. Now, out at the Marisdale School back, it would be 2001, the state of Pennsylvania put the school on the wrong side of the Shaw Mines Road, or they misnamed the road that the school was actually seated on. And it said, "Look guys, the Shaw Mines side of the track is not the wrong side of the tracks," okay? I mean, a couple of school board members were upset about that they put the address on the wrong side of the track. And I think they got it cleared up eventually, but that's what happened. And it says Marisdale area school location codes are screwed up by the state, okay? And so in 2001, that's what the state of Pennsylvania was up to. Jenna's told me I'm not allowed to use too much political stuff. I'll blame it on her.
Blame it on me.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Ready?
Yeah, okay. Okay, and once in a while I got on PennDOT. PennDOT just they seem to screw up by the numbers no matter what. I shouldn't say that on TV, should I?
Well, the library is the views represented by Mr. Menser are not necessarily shared by the Myersdale Public Library. We put that disclaimer.
There.
Cool. Okay. It says, this is after winter is, and PennDOT has said that chips don't harm the car, okay? You're, what? Yep, PennDOT's tar, our chips. Okay, how come PennDOT gets to use our cars as ditch compactors and asphalt tampers? Which means that they pile the asphalt up, and then you get to drive over it and flatten it down to where it's supposed to be. But Anyway, so that's kind of a weird way of looking at things, but it's true. Okay. And once in a while I did get serious. And when Somerset Trust back, what has been 2000, renovated the building rather than have it torn down, they did a tremendous job, so I thought I better thank them for it. So this is my own way of doing things. It says, wow, son, just like when I was a kid. Now, if you see the blue lines on there, blue lines do not reproduce with the film that we use to make the paper, okay? Red shows up as black, and obviously it was something I forgot about that, so I just used a red pen to go in there and make it appear to be black, because when it reproduced it would show up as black. So that's kind of that's why it's got red and blue on there. The blue you wouldn't see.
Does anyone realize what's missing from this picture?
Thank you. The clock. Back about 30 years ago, I was put in charge of having the clock renovated, and it was in terrible shape. It would have probably fallen down by now if it hadn't been repaired. But anyhow, I had to have a whole new frame built on the inside of it. 4 guys did that. Clappers helped me take it down with their lift truck that they used, and of course then they put it back up whenever we got ready to put it back up again. But I had new glass put in it, I had new dials put in it, and if you look over there, it's been 25 years. It still looks pretty good. The only thing I can see is that there's a ball on the bottom of it, and that was on one of the original pictures. And when they welded the ball to the bottom of the housing on the clock, they evidently punched a hole in it with a weld, and water got in there, and if you look at it real close, where the seam is on the ball, it's split. Hadn't fallen off yet, but it's split. But anyway, the clock is gone. Thank you, Jen.
Where was it? It was in the bank building?
No, it was hanging on the side of it.
I know, but when you, was it on the bank building when Somerset Trust bought it? Or was
Yes.
it stored inside?
No,
Okay.
it was hanging on there. Everything from about this far up on the inside of it was rusted off. So 4 guys rebuilt the entire skeleton for it. And they made the housing on the bottom that had the louvers and things in it. So they did, and it didn't cost us anything. The most expensive part was the 4 dials that I had created out of stained glass. So, and then whenever we got ready to hang it, Clappers came in with their lift truck and we hung it up.
Ready?
Yep. Okay, at the time, and I still kind of feel that way, windmills probably will never keep up with the amount of electricity that we use. And I am anti-climate change. So we can't get involved too much in that. But anyhow, we jumped right through the nuclear age, right back into the windmill age. Now, who can answer this question? What did communists use before candles? Electricity. About 2 o'clock in the morning, someone will go wake up and go, "Oh, yeah, okay." She's sitting there going, "Yeah, okay." So anyhow, if you'll notice that George did not particularly care for windmills. Now you're windmill blind. You don't even see them when you get up in the morning and come to work.
I still remember when they put the first ones up outside of Garrett. Like all you could do, like every time you drove by, it was like they were so weird to see
they
the
never
first
were
ones.
operating all at the same time. There was always 1, 2, or 3 of them never running.
What I noticed the other day, I was coming down the Garrett shortcut And there's that really old house that you see when you're coming down off the Garrett shortcut. There's that old house on the top of the hill, and it's always intrigued me. And I thought, the windmills are now gone, but the old house is,
It's still there.
I don't know, there's
And
a little bit of
and
irony in
it
that.
looks like it leans too a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know anything about it.
But
No,
it's still
huh.
standing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Alright.
Now, when I said, that, you know, always picking on people, I did do a cartoon in 2000 that says, I wanted to thank everybody who worked on these projects. And of course I signed it. But anyway, it says, and they say there are no craftsmen in this area. Check this out. The Western Maryland Station, the Somerset Trust, the clock, and the fountain. So the fountain was done too, was overhauled sometime during that period of time. And they put in a new pump because the old one would be destroyed sometime during the year by somebody pouring soap into it. So they bought a pump that can handle the soap. But anyhow, that was my thanks to people for doing what they did. And I have no idea who the guy on the left is. It's just another one of my characters that I used to fill in space. Now, this was another calendar cover. But if you look at it close enough, you'll see weird little things that are floating around in there. Of course, you see the Earth floating in the background with a smiley face. There's a satellite there up to the my left of it. And he's holding up the newspaper. Daystar. Does anybody know what a Daystar is? You know what a Daystar is? Does anybody know what a Daystar is?
You've stumped us. Tell us.
The sun. Ah! See, this is the little thought things that I slip into these things that you kind of go, you gotta be kidding me. And if you look at the paper, you'll see that there's a monolith on there. Does anybody know what the monolith means? Cal, that should be in your area. 2001 Space Odyssey. The monolith on 2001 Space Odyssey. And of course the balls floating around, the little Martian, the, what was the name of the Pedro that had the coffee commercial back about maybe before your time? The South America, Colombia. Oh, yeah, Colombia, coffee. Oh boy.
The richest kind.
And then of course the locomotive, be the Western Maryland locomotive too, because I like to pick on them a little bit. But then the, if you look at the man's visor, the astronaut's visor, it's got a reflection of the sun, of the Earth in the background. And then the rest of the accoutrements on there are all just kind of made up, because he's always carrying enough junk on him so that if something goes, if the thing starts to go where it's not supposed to go, then he can go press a button somewhere and hopefully he'll fix it. So anyhow, and then the background with the moon doesn't have the little jaggy cliffs. It's got the little rounded hill type rocks and stuff. But anyway, that's where it is. And there is on the breastplate here, there is another little smiley face and a little knobs and dials and stuff like that. So anyway, this is just another weird way of looking at things. So anyway, that would have been 2006 or 2006, I think. But anyhow, the New Republic made it to the moon. Okay. And then Myersdale schools provide drug testing kits to parents. And the lady says, "Here you go, son. Now be a good boy and go upstairs and fill the bottle. And yes, I do love you." That's kind of an anti-drug thingy for parents to look and, you know, test their kids out on. So the school at one point, I think, wanted to do something similar, like a program like that at one point in time. But anyway, that would have been 2002. So whatever happens, that happens. Okay. Now, like I said, pear trees. Does everybody remember pear trees?
I do, because
Okay,
that's
there's
when
none
I
out
worked-
there anymore.
That's when I worked at the paper.
Yeah.
There was so much controversy over those crazy trees.
Oh, those the daggone pear trees. They came and they ripped up the sidewalks and they planted these things, and they were never going to be much bigger than this. They were never going to be more than 25 feet tall, and they were never going to fill out. Well, then you got the leaves. Then you had these blooming little pears that were rotted and rotted on the limbs and everything, and it just created a mess. And of course, they cut up the sidewalks, and they found out when they cut up the sidewalks that underneath the sidewalks was the rubble that they put in there in 1910 whenever they built Myersdale. So they were trying to plant these trees on top of rocks. And there was only one tree that I knew that grew really big, and that was out in front of the library here. So I think because Diane went out and watered it every day. But anyhow, whenever we got the new sidewalks and the Renaissance, the trees were removed. When we got the new lights and everything.
Is there still one up in front of Price's? Or
I think there is, yeah.
I,
It is.
I think that one might still be there. I want to say. Yeah.
Bill Price made that a prerequisite, that tree was not removed. It wasn't.
It wasn't.
You either
Cool.
loved or hated the tree project.
Who?
Didn't they say?
I said you either loved or hated the tree project.
Didn't they, one of the things was pear trees in the Maple City?
Yeah. And they could have gotten, I think it was a little red maple that would have done exactly the same thing.
Why'd they use pear trees?
Huh?
Why pear?
Because these trees weren't supposed to get much bigger around than this, and they weren't supposed to go much above 25 feet in height. And they weren't supposed to leaf and fall off and create all kinds of problems, but they did.
And Leroy Glime liked the pear trees.
Huh?
Leroy Glime, the mayor, liked the pear trees.
I didn't want to mention his name.
Oh, you didn't want to mention?
Yeah,
his
it wasn't,
Well, I didn't mention his name either.
okay. Just, everybody forget that.
Well, some people like the trees. I mean, it
Oh,
was
yeah,
a
they-
nice idea. I
For
think.
about 2 weeks, they were really pretty.
Oh, George, they were pretty for more than 2 weeks.
The best days are behind us.
Okay, Jim. And again, I got on the trees. Says, Mom, go get Aunt Mamie again. She's putting parking meter money into the pear tree. Well, at that time, we didn't have parking meters. Bill Niggy managed to get those taken out about so many thousand years ago. But this was another unexpected problem. But this was just kind of a joke. It's kind of completely made up.
I don't think I realized Myersdale had parking meters until we started scanning all of those negatives that you gave us from the New Republic, and I'm like, oh my gosh, back in the day, Myersdale had parking meters.
Well, when my mother was the council member and the president of the council, they tried to hire meter maids, and they did hire somebody to do meters. And whenever they gave them a ticket up here at the post office somewhere, the guy got out of the car and just raised holy cane with them, and so he quit almost immediately. I don't think he made $25 that day, but it just was a boondoggle. And I can remember Bill Nagy sitting around at the council meetings and saying, we got to get rid of those meters. And we'll do it on a temporary basis. Well, I knew as soon as some politician says temporary basis, it's gone forever, maybe. So we haven't put them back, but nobody seems to enforce the 2-hour law. Okay. Now, again, this is kind of a homage to whenever they built the new annex to the courthouse. And the reason I'm using the elephant and the donkey was that both of them agreed to have the place built. They tore down the armory, which was a kind of a Somerset County treasure, because they had auctions in there, they had dances in there, quite a few things for being an armory. But anyhow, it was a kind of a meeting place for people in the area. And when they tore it down, the hue and cry was, "My golly, what are you gonna do?" Well, we're gonna have a new annex. Well, fortunately, the annex worked out. But that was my approval of saying, okay, at least they worked together to get this thing done. Okay. And then one night I got railroaded into attending the Summit Township Supervisors meeting. And it says, what's going to happen next, folks? Mystery, suspense, drama, and comedy. The best free entertainment in the county. Come on in, come on in. Well, it was entertainment because when I went, it was almost like a circus, like a carnival. Like you had a shill out front that was pointing with his cane going, come on in, come on in. So anyway, this was one of those that it PO'd a lot of people, and I got some kind of nasty phone calls on it. And so it's just they didn't like the idea that we pointed out to them that they had kind of a controversy going. Because I just figured if people kind of thought that it might be an entertaining evening, they would show up to the Summit Township council meetings, so supervisors meetings. Never happened, but who knew? But anyhow, that was in 1999. Okay. And then when Flight 93, of course, that took a lot of wind out of our sails. We once in a while I get into a really patriotic mood, and this was one of those times where I did get into the patriotic mood, and it's one of those times where I get to kind of draw things as they are, and this was one of the things. Now you see the scribblings on the side; those were kind of the ideas I'm trying to work out to finalize the drawing. And of course, if you look real close and see the blue lines, you'll see that it probably went through about 3 or 4 manifestations before I finally got the eagle done and the flag done and everything like that. And believe me, drawing stars is not my favorite thing to draw. That's why there's only about 6 or 7 stars on the daggone thing. And I wasn't even sure if I had the stripes right, with the red one on top, the next one down white, so on down the line. So that's just one of those little glitches that I have going on in my head. And that would have been in 2001, 2002. Okay. Now again, PennDOT. The duh factor. It says, I say we paint the road lines first. This is the road from Summit Mills, and I come to work every morning on that road, down past the fairgrounds. And one morning I can remember that I read in the paper that they wanted to tar and chip the road. And then at that time they were painting the signs on all the roads, which they try to do about once a year regardless of how faded they are. So anyhow, I thought, okay, this is going to be a good one. Well, the next morning when I came to work, they painted the lines, and then they poured the tar and chips on top of the lines. So from Summit Mills to Meyersdale, all the lines were covered up with the tar and chips. I was surprised I didn't find my car one morning with tar and chips all over it. So guess what they did first? Yep, they painted the lines. Okay. Now, again, Meyersdale Borough Council. It says when weed laws go astray. Now, the only thing that I can see on this one that I did wrong was I should have flopped it because the reading doesn't read the right direction. Americans read from left to right, top to bottom. And it says weed laws gone astray. And he says, what's the problem, officer? Your weed straw rats and snakes, which is some of what people use as the reason why you got to get rid of the weeds. And it says, rats, snakes get them. Snakes move out when the rats are gone. I would have liked to have flopped that one so that everything's reading from that left to right. But anyway, if you look, artists tend to hide, they call them Easter eggs. And they hide little things in cartoons or, in fact, drawings and things that they call them Easter eggs. We call them Easter eggs. Easter eggs means that you have to hunt for them. Mm-hmm. But if you look real close at this, you'll see there's a snake down there next to the officer.
Yep.
And that's my little Easter egg for that cartoon. And then one of the poems that I really like is by Eugene Field. It's called The Little Boy Blue. And I can't read this one without crying. It's just, when I was a kid, I grew up in there. My mother would read us to us each Christmas. And I thought it was one of the saddest poems I've ever read. I'm not going to read it for you now because we'll see what happens. But if you really want to look for it, it says, I'll just start it out. It says, the little toy dog is covered with dust, but sturdy and staunch he stands. The little toy soldier is red with rust, and his musket molds in his hands. I'll let you go beyond there. So that's the reason why this, and this is what we finished in 2015. Okay.
Give people a minute if they wanna read it, I'll give them a minute.
Oh yeah, okay, we can let them. Does somebody want to get up and read it?
George, what's the poem called?
Huh?
What's the poem called?
Little Boy Blue by Eugene Field.
I'll read it. The little toy dog is covered with dust, but sturdy and staunch he stands.
You get a little closer.
The little toy soldier is red with rust, and his musket molds in his hands. Time was when the little toy dog was new, and the soldier was passing fair. And that was the time when our little boy Blue kissed them and put them there. Now don't you go till I come, he said, and don't you make any noise. So toddling off in his trundle bed, he dreamt of the pretty toys. And as he was dreaming, an angel song awakened our little boy Blue. Oh, the years are many, the years are long, but the little toy friends are true. I faithful to the little boy Blue they stand, each in the same old place, awaiting the touch of a little hand, the smile of his little face. And they wonder as they waiting, and the long years through, in the dust of that little chair, what has become of our little boy Blue since he kissed them and put them there? Eugene Field.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Appreciate that.
Sure.
Does everybody have a little tear in the corner of their eye?
Almost made me tear up.
Okay, this is a true story. Let's see, were you there whenever I did this? No, 16.
No, that was after my time.
We had a Christmas party, and George is supposed to get the pop. So I forgot to get the pop when I came to work because I can't remember whether Shop and Save was open or not.
All you had to get was pop, and you
All I
forgot.
had to get was the pop.
Oh, George.
Well, when I went down there, they didn't have any liter bottles in the cooler. So when I got them up to the office, I think I had 3 of them. So when I got them up to the office, I took them out, and the borough had plowed up the snow on the side in front of the office. So I just took and punched them into the snow to cool them off. Well, at noontime when I went out to get them, the snow piles were gone. They had taken them and scooped them up with their snow thing and dumped them in a truck. And I'm almost certain that somebody said, well, George, you got to get down and get them, you know. So when springtime rolled around and those packs of snow melted, there was probably three liters of pop laying down there in the field. Everybody's going, wonder where they came from. I did it. But I couldn't believe it. I thought maybe the snowplow driver would, they had the skip loaders. I figured he would pick them up and see them and say, okay, knock on. No. Never occurred to me that would happen. Okay. Again, PennDOT. Every morning we turn a mouse loose on the road. When he finds his way to the other end, we change the signs, because if you remember whenever they were building the interchanges out here by the farm, Pete and Brink's farm, every day you went out there, the arrows were pointing a different direction, or pointing to the left, pointing to the right, pointing back to Marisdale, and this is where this came from. And that's how they do it. They did it with a mouse. That whenever the mouse turned himself, whenever they turned this mouse loose, he would go, and when he couldn't find his way through, they changed the arrows.
Now he's in Somerset.
Now he's probably lost in Somerset. Okay, but anyhow, and then if, you might not remember, but up on Berkeley Flat, on the other end, when it hits 160, they spelled Myersdale, Myersdale.
Uh-huh.
And they did spell Boynton, Boyton, because there's an N in there too. And it took them a couple of years to change the one out here on the end of the road. Okay.
Didn't they have Myersdale spelled wrong at the end of Glade City Road too at one point?
Mm-hmm.
No, they put
It might still be wrong.
they switched the signs from up in Summit Mills or St. Paul with the one up in where'd you say?
I think
At
at the end
Stretch
of
Hill, they
Glade
changed,
City
they had the
Road,
signs
they're
flip-flopped
long.
out there.
Yeah,
Oh,
on
160.
160, it was spelled Myersdale with a M-Y.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they've messed it up more than one place. Yeah.
Well, we had the thing with the pig farms out on, out over behind, oh shoot. They were building the pig farm out on, what is it, Lost Lake Road? What's the one up, you go up past Berkeley's Mills and then back over,
Mhm.
huh? You know where Fritz Cemetery is?
Yeah, yeah.
Back and around that corner
Oh.
somewhere.
I know where you mean, but it's not Lost Lakes Road.
But anyway, one of the people up there got on his high horse that he didn't want this pig farm built. So he said that pig poop smells. Well, pig poop is pig poop. So anyhow, he was fighting the fact that they gave him the permit to do this, and they weren't sure whether or not they would approve the permit to have this place built. It's been built, and as far as I know, I've been past it a few times, it doesn't smell. But anyway, it says these two farmers were carping about pig farm and the Maple Festival, and the Maple Festival guy says, yeah, but my maple trees don't poop. So that's kind of how that one came about, and I call it making a living. And then I was in Florida, and my oldest grandson, he'd have been about 7 or 8 at the time, he called it, hey Dad, Granddad's using his own GPS, and he referred to it as the grandpa positioning system. And because I was still using a road map to get around, and he would sit in the back. Now my oldest son, before he died, was taking us down there. He would drive us down, and Keith would make a problem with his GPS, and he'd get lost, and the GPS would go, what's the word I'm hunting now? Recalculate, and it would, and it was a female voice on the thing, and he'd go, recalculate. And Kobe, the oldest grandson, like I said, he was 7 or 8 at the time, he would sit in the back and go, recalculate, and it would drive Keith nuts. And he threatened to throw the kid out of the car a couple of times because every time he did this, and you could see he was getting upset with Kobe because he would go, recalculate. Okay. Now, whenever they started this STEM program, I always felt that it should have, and this was in 17 when they first came out with it. It says science, engineering, technology, and math. I always felt that they ought to have art in there, so it makes it STEAM.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like I'm the one that started the arts program to put art into STEAM, into the STEM. What? You don't believe me?
And the county system,
Huh?
it is now STEAM team.
They started STEAM,
I know.
and this is
I'm
proof.
just laughing that you think you're the one that started it all.
That I spelled it wrong.
No, you're the one who started it all.
I like to think I did.
He's a visionary.
He is. You are.
Because I feel that art is as important as the other programs that they have. I think, then you told me the other day about there should be another one in there. I can't remember what it was. But anyhow, I've always felt that art should be involved in this. So,
Cindy said
some,
reading also.
huh?
There should be an R for reading.
A what?
An R in it for reading.
Reading.
Yes.
Stream. That's right,
She was
you're the one that
kidding.
said that.
Cindy did, but yeah, she was kidding.
So that's where this, it just offends me whenever they leave out the arts. Because one of the first things they want to cut in school are the music programs and the art programs. But they want to keep football and all the other supportive groups, the exterior stuff. Okay. And then, this is one of those where, which would you rather eat? A chicken that's corn-fed or one that feeds itself on barnyard leftovers? Like worms and bugs and grubs and everything like that. Me personally, I don't eat chicken, but I would like to eat one that's corn-fed rather than junk-fed. So that's where this would come. And it says it's just a matter of taste. Yeah. And I was having problems with my heart. I had to have some stents put in 18. And it says my check engine light came on, which was just simply, the symptoms are there. And if you pay attention to them, you might live another 10 or 12 years and maybe 50 years and be able to do something like this again and again. Because I have 4,000 cartoons I could use. Okay. And again, once I got on the pear trees again, I walked out of our office one day and it caught me right here in the corner of my eye, one of the branches, because the burro didn't keep up with them. They didn't trim them like they were supposed to. And this branch caught me right here. If I hadn't had my glasses on, it might have caught me in the eye. So anyhow, that's where this one came from. And I called it Paris Pocus in the Eyes. And I think that within a year or two, they started to tear them down, pull them out. Okay. Now this one is one of those that I think I used it for a calendar. But anyhow, there was one of my friends, I did this as a caricature for one of my friends that retired from her business. And the one, if you look, she's got a really nasty set of spurs on. And the mule is saying, hot damn, she's wearing spurs. Okay. Now, if you look real close, I did modify it. There's horse apples behind the cow, behind the animal. And of course it reads, the New Republic is that she's a deliverer. Well, there's one thing, whenever I showed it to the office, somebody said, there ain't no woman built like that. Well, if you look about at her right arm, you'll see a gap right there. I had to do a little bit of reduction surgery on a particular part of her anatomy. And I never bothered to repair it. I never repaired it for sure. And, but anyhow, that's why there's a gap right there. Because she, and the comment was, there ain't no woman built like that. Well, unfortunately or fortunately, this lady was built like that. So anyhow, to make everything happy in the office, I removed a little bit of anatomy. Okay, anything? And then Meyersdale Municipal Authority back in 18 got hammered because they weren't doing their water quality testing. And the state Department of Water said, isn't this supposed to be clear? Well, if you've been around Meyersdale for a length of time, you know once in a while the water gets really nasty colored. And sometimes they tell you that it's going to look like that. But yeah, that was just one of those things that, that's what happens. And then for Veterans Day, now I tend to gloam on that Veterans Day and Memorial Day. And this one, it says Veterans Day 2008. It says, this is my great grandfather. He was a dog face in World War II, and it was a show and tell for veterans. And then on the side there, I did change, I put the little, my little character over there in a military uniform, in an Army uniform. And it said, my great uncle David Sharp was killed in action on Okinawa in 1945, and that's true. So there's not too many World War II veterans around right at this point in time, and this was in, when did I do it? 2008, so it's 20 some years ago. Okay. Now, when I was in the service, this was one that was in the Desert Airmen in 1975, and the sergeant that's pointing, he's saying he's turning to this. If you look at it, probably either a light colonel or a major on his shoulder, the one that's smoking a cigar. And it says he's turned out his landing lights once more, and says, "Guess who? I'm turning off the runway lights and saying, guess where?" Okay, well, it's not going to happen because they can land in pitch dark. But anyhow, it just was one of those where, did somebody do this? Undoubtedly they did at some point in time. But in any way, pilots and flight crew members are sometimes too comical for their own good. Okay. Now, when I was also in Arizona, this was called the Arizona Territorial. And this was one of those where the gentleman up on the, that's running the puppets, he had his own crew that had, he was the puppet master. And he was the one that controlled the votes and things on the Tucson, the water rate, the water board. And I think his name was Ron Stern. But anyhow, there was always one vote against, and one vote that the lady down in the corner, the right-hand corner, she always abstained on anything controversial. So I had to pick and choose who was I going to use on this, and I had to kind of know. I did a lot of studying on these people, and they're fairly accurate representations of it. But anyhow, this was one that I was fed. So just a matter of getting the drawing down to where I wanted to go. The puppet master was the guy that was in charge of everything. Okay. Now this one was on the All Alaska Weekly up in Fairbanks, and this is a full page. This was a full page drawing, like big. At one point in time, and this was in '78, Jay Hammond was running for re-election, and Hammond was the governor, and he was one that he got the permanent funds situated, and he did away with income taxes. The permanent fund was based on the money that was going to be coming in from the oil pipeline. And the oil pipeline, the day I got to Alaska was the day the pipeline started, and it exploded. And it took another couple of months for it to get it back online again. But anyhow, he's the one that started this permanent fund, and he took away income taxes. So if you live in Alaska, you don't pay income taxes. And once a year, the state figures out, you have to be a resident, the state figures out how much money each Alaskan resident is going to get. The one year I can remember that there were people that got $1,000 apiece for everybody in the state that was a resident. Most military people did not qualify because we weren't residents. But I had 2 or 3 people that worked in one of my shops that they were residents because they were going to live there when they retired, and they each got $1,000. And it was based on a sliding scale. So Hammond was in trouble for this. There's 11 other ones on there, and every one of those guys was trying to become governor in the state of Alaska. There were 1 or 2 that were good, but the rest of them were just somebody that crawled out of the woodwork because they found out they could run for governor, and they might get it. But Hammond finally persevered. He didn't win by a landslide. He won to a very close election, and it's just, he's got the anvil. The anvil says, I'm sinking. And at that point in time, it was in May. The election was in November. he managed to get reelected. Okay. Okay, and this is another one of those that public service announcement. The library and Myersdale Community Center, and it's 'tis the season. It's just simply help us. And this is in 2003. Okay. Okay, and then every now and then I got in this kick. It says, who are the real Native Americans? The unfortunate thing is, we all are. Every one of us that I see sitting here is a native of the United States. Are there any illegals? Nope. You're a native, and what are you? You're an American. So that makes you a Native American. And I put this on every form that I send to the government. And so far, as you can see, I'm not sitting in jail. And because I put down that I'm a Native American. And they can't argue with me. So they've changed it. If you think about it, they've changed it. They changed it to Indigenous Americans. Did I win? Nah, but I'm still a Native American. And I always will be a Native American. Okay. Now my little guy that I've always used in the corner of my cartoons is called the Frosty Sons of Thunder, and that was something that my father always told me about. It says, I'm the old sage, a frosty son of thunder. Welcome to my world, the world of the roof garden of Pennsylvania. In Somerset County, it was called the roof garden at one time. You'll see me in the corner of this panel each week. And this is how I introduced my character. So anyway, that's where that one came from. Now, Bill Mauldin was an editorial cartoonist. And he was very famous during World War II. He drew for Stars and Stripes. Patton wanted to have him court-martialed because his were anti-American, anti-army. And has anybody ever seen MASH? Okay, you remember the story where Frank Burns runs a tank over Colonel Potter's Jeep, smashes it flat? Colonel Potter gets out of his Jeep, or he's out of the Jeep already. He goes back to the Jeep that's all crushed up. He pulls out his pistol and he shoots it. Willie and Joe did this, and these were characters that Bill Mauldin created, and he became a Pulitzer Prize winning cartoonist after World War II. But anyhow, these were his characters, and I copied them exactly, Willie and Joe. And it says, I don't think Bill would like us modeling over him like this, Joe. So that's, and I put down apologies and my sincerest thanks. And that would have been in 2003. But anyhow, Bill Mauldin was one of my heroes when I was growing up as a cartoonist. Okay. Now again, we have a small town traffic jam. If you've ever sat up in front of the Moose and waited till there was a train stopped across the crossing, and I think they stopped it because they're not allowed to block a crossing for more than 5 or 10 minutes. And that's where this one comes. It says, hey engineer, we only have 3 school buses, 2 log trucks, 5 cars, a coal truck, and an ambulance. Can you give us another 5 minutes? And that's where that came from, because I was stuck in traffic up there one day, and by the time I got down to where I could go across the bridge at High Street, of course I get behind all the traffic when I come down off of the road from the hill. But that's where that one came from. But I don't think they do that so much anymore. But they would change crews, park the train wherever they felt like it, and then change a crew down the track, and it would take them 5 to 10 minutes to do that. It lasted all of 30 seconds. Hey, she's having fun. Why not? What's your name?
Hill.
Yeah, what's your name?
Hill.
What is it?
Karina.
Dorina?
Karina.
Dorina? Okay.
Karina.
Corina. C-O.
K.
K. K-O. Okay. Okay, go ahead. And then Meyersdale, back in '6, Meyersdale had their cops, they wanted to put their cops on foot patrol. Now, and of course now with radios, they can call all over town. But nobody seemed to think that whenever you're on foot patrol and you're out at the fairgrounds, what's gonna happen if something over in, on 11th Avenue? About the two furthest places you can get away to in Meyersdale. So I don't think that lasted very long, because I don't think too many of our cops could run that fast to be able to break up a fight over there. But anyhow, it says it's a fighting process, and like this is gonna work. And I think probably within a very short period of time, they realized that it just couldn't. That's the end of it? That's the end of it. I could go home and get another 500 if you want me to. But Jen would have a problem with that. But anyhow, I appreciate everybody coming, and gives me a chance to put my views on y'all. And I think that I do appreciate everybody that came.